Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the 2024 Hyundai i20. Now last year, Ford shocked the automotive world by killing off the Fiesta, arguably the best small family hatchback you can buy. So with no one sat on the throne, everyone else wants to get that title, including this, Hyundai's i20. Now for 2024, it has had a bit of a midlife facelift, a nip tuck to the styling, a boost of technology, but surprisingly, they've taken away the hybrid. You can only get this as a full petrol engine. So I've had this new tweaked i20 for a week, and I'm going to answer a couple of questions. Number one, is it any good? And number two, with the fact that you can't get a hybrid version in a very competitive and electrified segment, does it feel like it's taken a step backwards? Stick with me to find out. Now, when it comes to the i20 styling, let's be honest, Hyundai didn't really have to do much in terms of a midlife facelift because it's already such a good looking car. Don't forget, this spawned the i20N. And also what I love is that it's a massive departure from the previous generations, which definitely had a whiff of Werther's original about them. But with this new i20, it looks very youthful, definitely appeals to a younger customer base. And I love the fact that actually Hyundai haven't done much. We've had a bit of a refresh to the grille. We've got a couple of extra vents. All the lights are LEDs at the front and rear. And the Hyundai badge has gone from the grille up here onto the bonnet. Now there is something else that's changed, and it's only on the top two trim levels. Yeah, it's the alloy wheels. They're 17 inches and they definitely have a look about them. I definitely think if you drive this in a certain way, you could summon a demon. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Now also for the midlife facelift, it has got 3 new paint colours. This one here is called Lumin Grey, and it does actually stand out. However, there is a certain colour I would definitely have my i20 in. But when it comes to the exterior styling, I think Hyundai have done an amazing job with it, and it definitely looks one of the best in class. And on that note, I think it's time we go from the outside of the i20 and see what they've done with the inside. Sat in the front of the revised i20, you are greeted by a very comfortable, well kitted out and actually nicely designed interior, although there is one big drawback. Now, because this is a small family hatchback, getting in and out of the i20 can be a little bit tricky if you do suffer from mobility issues, because you have to bend down to get into the car. So if you have got mobility issues, I would recommend looking at something like the Hyundai Bayon, because it is essentially an i20 but lifted up. But then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you do find that the seats themselves are very comfortable. They do hold a big bear like me in place, and there is a good amount of manual adjustment. Now I will mention that there is no adjustable lumbar support. Now with the steering, we have got both rake and reach adjustment, so getting the ideal driving position is easy. And one thing as well is that you can sit quite low in the cabin, so it does feel like a bit of a hot hatchback. However, there is one thing I have come across, and that is the seat belt. Now, if you are a larger size person like myself, you might find it a bit of a struggle when putting the seat belt through and getting that attached. So that's just something to be aware of. But for the most part, it's been absolutely fine. Now, when it comes to interior quality, it is a little bit of a letdown in here. There are a lot of hard, scratchy plastics here on top of the dash and doors. And really, when it comes to soft touch plastics, we've got some leatherette here on the door panel and on the center armrest, plus the leather that surrounds the steering wheel. So it is a little bit, yeah, it is a little bit poor, especially when compared to some of its newer rivals, especially the likes of the Peugeot 208. But whilst driving the i20 this week, I've not experienced any squeaks or rattles, so it does feel well screwed together. I just wish the interior quality, or at least the perceived quality, was improved. But other than that, no, being sat here in the front of the i20, it's a really nice place to be. It is comfortable, it got a great driving position, but as I mentioned, there is that little niggle there with the seatbelt if you are the size of a big bear like me. Cubby spaces in the i20 are actually pretty impressive, especially in one area, and that is the door pockets. They are massive. Easily you can get a large bottle of drink in there. Now granted, they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around in there, but that is really impressive. In fact, it's exactly like the Bayonne I drove last year, so that is a highlight. Now on the center console up front, we have got a rubberized wireless charging pad, something you can get on the Ultimate trim, and we have also got a USB-A and USB-C charging input, as well as a 12-volt socket. Then behind the gear lever, we have got two cup holders of various sizes. They're a decent size and depth. They are not lined with any rubber or anything like that, or have any plastic grippers, but they do hold a nice coffee cup in place or a small can of drink. Then we've got the center armrest, which firstly does slide forward, so you can rest your arm there on a long journey. But when you lift that up, you've got a little bit of additional space, and it is lined with fabric, so that is a bonus, although some rivals do have a bit more space under there. And then finally we got the glove box, which is of an okay size, again not lined with any fabric, and in typical Hyundai Group fashion, the book pack is massive and does take up a big chunk of that space. So yeah, when it comes to cubby spaces in the i20, those door pockets are a real highlight, and yeah, it is pretty decent. Now, as I said earlier, I do like the interior design of the i20. It's got a nice pleasant feel about it. It does feel slightly driver focused in the way everything's laid out, and I do like these little kind of whooshy line effects going throughout the cabin and into kind of the speaker area. It is really nice and pleasant, if not exactly very bright in here. It is all dark plastics. Now granted, yes, we have got the lighter headlining to light up the cabin and the sunroof on this Ultimate trim, but yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more in the ways of colour. But in terms of ergonomics, it is actually really sound in here, and if you have got a Hyundai Group car, you're going to feel right at home. We have got touch sensitive buttons just below the infotainment system. All the buttons for the single zone climate control are nicely laid out and easy to use when on the move. As I mentioned down below, we have got a USB-A, USB-C and 12-volt socket, as well as the wireless charging pad. A couple of little convenience buttons for your parking sensors, your cameras and your heated seats, also your drive mode select. Now on the steering wheel on the left hand side, we have got your media and communication controls, as well as a dedicated button you can have for the infotainment system. And then on the right hand side, we've got your driver data controls, as well as your cruise control controls. The only thing I will say is that if you go for the manual version of the i20, which is what I've got here, you don't get the smart cruise control. You have to go for the DCT. And then finally, we've got a couple of buttons on the right hand side for your start stop for the engine, traction control and your heated steering wheel, etc. So yeah, if you have got a Hyundai Group car, you will feel right at home here in the i20. It is nicely laid out, really nicely designed, but yeah, as I said, I'd like there to be a bit more colour in here. And then finally, we've got the infotainment system and the digital dashboard display. Both of them 10.25 inches. You do get that larger display on the premium and ultimate trim levels. On the entry level advance, it is a little bit smaller, but it's a really lovely infotainment system. As I mentioned, we've got the touch sensitive buttons set down below it, but they are easy to use when on the move. And then the infotainment system itself is nice and responsive. It's very clear, and yeah, it's actually a really nice system to use. The icons are of a decent size, so it's easy to use when on the move. You have got things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It is tethered only, but yeah, it is a really good system. And then we got the digital dashboard display, which is a typical Hyundai Group display, and again, it's really lovely. The clarity of the screen is nice. You're presented with lots of information, but you're not bombarded with too much. And then using the buttons on the right hand side of the steering wheel, you can go through the various menus. I do as well like when you go from normal to sport mode, I do like how the icons are displayed. It really does look very sporty in sport mode. And then finally, I will mention that we have a reversing camera on this Ultimate trim, and when you put the car in reverse, the clarity is pretty decent. However, the camera is very much prone to getting covered in muck and dirt, especially in wet and miserable conditions. So you might need to go out there with a little cloth and give it a wipe every so often. But yeah, it does very easily get covered. So all in all, when you're sat here in the front of the i20, it is a nice, comfortable place to be. It's just lacking in that perceived quality when compared to rivals, but it is jam-packed full of kit. And on that note, I think it's time that we leave the front of the i20 and see what it's like for rear passengers. Sat in the back of the i20, I'm going to say it's not too bad back here, but it's definitely more suited for kids. Now that driver's seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, knee room's not too bad, but yeah, headroom is almost at a premium, and I did rub my head against the roofline in there as I leant forward, and that's down to the sunroof. I would recommend getting 2 adults sat in the back of the i20, but if you are over 6 foot tall, you are going to feel very cramped. Like I said, it's definitely more suited to kids. Now, speaking of kids, we have got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and we've got a little zip to actually get access to the bars, and they're not too difficult to get open, which is actually a nice thing to come across. Also, the doors open nice and wide, so it should make fixing a child seat pretty easy. Now, when it comes to cubby spaces, it's a little bit hit and miss. Now, the door pockets are of a really decent size, just like the front. You can get a medium, possibly large bottle of drink in there, but I would stick with a medium for it to fit nicely. I've got no aeroplane style pocket on the back of the driver's seat, but there is one on the back of the passenger seat. And yeah, that's it, because there's no center armrest or through loading into the boot area. And then when it comes to features, well, the main one is a USB-C charging input. So one person can charge their mobile device back here. But then we have got the windows, which are of a really lovely size and shape. They are tinted on this Ultimate trim, but they're big and square, and they do open pretty much all the way down. And what I like as well is that we have got another little window in the C-pillar, just to allow a little bit of extra light in. But it does mean that the C-pillar's not too thick, so that will aid the driver if it comes to things like blind spots. So yeah, being sat here in the back of the i20 is not too bad. It is, yeah, like I said, it's more suited for kids, but I could definitely do a medium journey back here. And on that note, I think it's time that we leave the rear seats and see what it's like in the boot. Opening the boot of your i20 presents you with 352 litres of space, which is kind of in the middle of this segment. It's not the biggest, but it's definitely not the smallest. But when you got the boot open, you are presented with a nice square load area, and actually the boot lip itself is not too high, so it does mean a dog could jump into the back, or if you want to load any heavy items into the back of the i20. And also there's not much of a boot lip to navigate over. Now, it's not devoid of features either. We have got some sturdy tethering hooks. We've got a little tray area on the right hand side with some strapping, as well as a little shopping hook. We've got a variable boot floor, or if you keep it in its highest level, we've got some underfloor storage. And even under the second floor, there's actually enough room there for a space saver spare wheel. So that's very handy as well. But I will mention that there is no 12-volt socket. And then we have got this nice unique feature where if you do unstrap the parcel shelf, you can slide it back and down, so you can get taller items into the back of the i20. So that is a really nice handy feature. Unfortunately, you can't put the parcel shelf underneath the boot floor, so that's a little bit disappointing. But if you do put the rear seats down, which you can do from the boot area, you do have a little bit of an incline, but it is still a very usable load space if you need to load any large bulky items into the back of your i20. So yeah, when it comes to the boot capacity, it is very decent. Like I said, it's kind of middle of the road compared to its rivals, but there are a number of very unique features to it. But it's just a shame as well, though, it hasn't got something like a 12-volt socket, but because we have got the Ultimate trim, we have got a subwoofer for the Bose sound system, and that is a really lovely system on the car. And you know what, I think on that note we should get the boot down, take the i20 for a drive and see what it's like there on the open road. So when you start driving the revised i20, the first thing you find is that it is a genuinely fun and nippy little family hatchback. It does put a smile on your face. And as I mentioned earlier, you can sit really low in the cabin, so it does feel like you're in a little hot hatch. Granted, I haven't got the performance to back it up, but I do feel like I've got brilliant driving position. And also as well, visibility is really good. I've got a brilliant view of the road ahead. Granted, because of the sloping bonnet, I can't see the front of the car. The A-pillars are surprisingly thick, but I've not found myself looking around them at any junctions. And then the wing mirrors are of a really lovely size and shape, and on this Ultimate trim I have got blind spot monitoring. And then finally, when I look over my shoulder, as you can probably see, I have got a small window in the C-pillar which adds a bit of extra light in, but also makes the C-pillar a bit thinner, so as a result you don't have a huge blind spot. And then rear visibility is actually pretty good. It's quite a high up rear screen, but I have got things like a reversing camera and front and rear parking sensors to help me out. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, it's great to have a reversing camera, but it is very much prone to mud and dirt getting splattered on it, especially in conditions like this. So yeah, first impressions when you start driving the revised i20 are very positive indeed. Now, when it comes to trim levels in the revised i20 range, there are 3 available. You've got the entry-level Advance, the mid-range Premium, and the top-of-the-range Ultimate, which is what I've got here. Now, I'm going to be honest, I would recommend going for the Premium, the mid-level spec, because in terms of standard equipment, you will have everything that you would want and need. You get things like climate control, the larger touchscreen, you got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, front and rear parking sensors, reversing camera, cruise control, and heated front seats. I mean, yeah, you've pretty much got everything that you would want for all occasions. The only things that you would pretty much miss out on is the sunroof and the Bose sound system. But really, those are kind of like the extra luxuries. Now, granted, yes, I am a big fan of good sound systems because I like to listen to tunes whilst I'm driving in these cars, and I might miss that Bose sound system if I went for the Premium, especially having driven the Ultimate. But that would be my recommendation. Look at the Premium because you get all the standard equipment that you would want and need. You can still get things like that lucid lime green colour. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Go for the Premium. If you want to upgrade to the Ultimate, by all means. It just means, yes, you got to pay a bit more for it. Now, when it comes to powering the revised i20, it is really lovely and simple. There is one engine available. It is a 1 litre 3-cylinder turbocharged petrol unit producing 99 brake horsepower and 172 Newton meters of torque. Now, you can get that with either a 6-speed manual gearbox, which is what I've got here, or a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Now, that power also goes straight to the front wheels. And I'm going to be honest, it does feel like a nice combination, that engine and gearbox. Now, when it comes to performance, 0 to 62 miles per hour takes around 10.4 seconds for the manual and 11.4 seconds for the DCT. But with that little turbo, it does feel quite nippy. Like I said earlier, this feels like a genuinely fun and nippy little hatchback. Now, the big surprise is that Hyundai have ditched the mild hybrid version of this engine, so you've solely got a full ICE version of that 1 litre for the i20, and that is a bit surprising. It almost feels like a bit of a backwards turn. But when it comes to economy, Hyundai say, let's get the blind down, I should get on a combined cycle around 51 miles per gallon, and I do believe them, because for most of my journeys I have been getting around mid to late 40s. I haven't quite yet cracked that 50 mpg, but I am doing a long drive later, so fingers crossed I do manage to do it. But yeah, in combination with the gearbox and the engine, it is a really nice setup. It feels a bit old school. I do love that 3-cylinder throaty thrum coming into the cabin. It kind of gives you that, yeah, slightly kind of sporty feel and sporty sound, and that adds to the character of the car. Like I said, the i20 is a genuinely fun little hatchback to drive. So yeah, it is a little bit disappointing that the mild hybrid version of that engine has disappeared, especially as a lot of the i20's rivals do come with hybridization or even full electrification. But you know what, this could just be Hyundai planning for the future, for the next generation of i20. which you never know could be fully electric. Now, as I mentioned, I've got the 6-speed manual gearbox with this particular i20, and it is actually a real joy to use. It feels very familiar with cars I've driven from Hyundai Group, particularly with the Kia Stonic and with the Bayon I drove last year. Now, it's not the slickest of gearboxes. It doesn't feel like a Civic Type R, but there is a little notch to it when you are changing gear, and it's what I call a positive notch, because you know you've got it in gear when you kind of slot it in. So that's something I do like about it, and it does make changing gear a joy. Also, the clutch pedal has got very little weight to it, so again, it makes changing gear an absolute joy and very easy around town. Now, when it comes to the i20's ride and refinement, I was actually pleasantly surprised. It is very comfortable, but I will mention that the i20 feels more set up to be on the firmer side and a bit more sportier than some of its rivals. So that might not be to your liking, but it does kind of match the sporty looking exterior. And like I said, it is actually very comfortable. It deals with most of the bumps and imperfections really well. It does absorb them, and for day-to-day driving, I've not had any issues. Now, at lower speed, it can feel a little bit unsettled and fidgety, particularly on a poor road surface, but the faster you go, the more it will kind of settle down. But that does mean that when it comes to the handling side of the i20, this should be a bit of a positive, and especially with the handling to match those exterior looks. And don't forget, there is the i20N you can buy, and that is considered a brilliant hot hatchback. So yeah, when it comes to day-to-day driving in the i20, I've had no issues whatsoever. Yes, it is a little bit firm, but it's not uncomfortable. The seats as well do take a good amount of the vibration out of what comes into the cabin. And now when it comes on to refinement, again, it's actually not too bad. The main intrusion into the cabin is a bit of tyre roar. That's it. Now granted, from the wing mirrors and the A-pillar, there's a little bit of wind noise, but it's not too intrusive. And it's only really when you drop it down a gear that you get engine noise coming into the cabin. But even then, you've got to really wring the engine out. So yeah, the main intrusion is a bit of tyre roar, but if you go for the ultimate trim, you have got the lovely Bose sound system, and that does take a lot of those exterior noises away from you. It is a really lovely sound system. So yeah, when it comes to the ride and refinement of the i20, I am very impressed. Yes, it is set up to be a bit more on the sporty side, but it is very rewarding and still very comfortable. So what about the i20's handling? Well, I'm gonna put it into sport mode and let's see what it's like. Nice little 90-degree corner here. Oh wow. Okay, that is impressive. That just held on, and with that little turbo I can do a little overtake. Yeah, that was impressive. The steering wheel feels lovely in my hands. It's got a nice amount of leather, real nice quality, and the size is just spot on. I'm in a brilliant driving position, and it just turns in when I want it to. It holds on really well. There's no understeer whatsoever. It feels very poised and composed, and even though I've only got 99 brake horsepower, it's genuinely a fun little hatchback to drive. And because the suspension has got that firmer setup to it, it actually means there's hardly any lean or roll in the corners. This is genuinely fun to drive. And I mean, we know that this car is going to be a great handling car. Look at the i20N. And for this family-friendly version to handle just as well is massive testament to Hyundai. So yeah, with the handling, and it's just then in combination with the ride and that little engine, yeah, you have got a fun little family hatchback that will genuinely put a smile on your face. It is. Oh, this is a hoot. And here's the thing as well, is you don't have to be in sport mode to do it. You can put it into normal mode and it still handles beautifully. If anything, you put it into sport mode just to get a little bit of extra weight in the steering and get those really cool dials on the display. Even in normal mode, this thing, yeah, it's chuckable and does again put a smile on your face. So yeah, when it comes to the ride, refinement, handling as a combination, you've got a genuinely fun little family hatchback. Not a hot hatch, but maybe a little mild to lukewarm one. So with my time in the i20, what have been some of the highlights and some of the little niggles I need to let you guys know about? Well, highlights have been the looks, and I'm really glad that Hyundai haven't really gone to town with this midlife facelift. It's just very mild revisions, but I love the fact we've got a couple of very bold colours available to choose from. If I was going to buy an i20, I would have it in that lucid line. And I do love the fact as well that we got a massive kind of boost in comfort and safety tech in the car. This does feel like a very lovely and safe place to be, especially in combination with how this car rides and handles. Now that does bring me on to one of the first little niggles, which is, yeah, being a Hyundai Group car with all those safety features, you get a lot of bongs. You get a bong if you go 1 mile an hour over the speed limit. You get another bong if you're changing speed zones. I'm pretty sure you get a bong to let you know if a bong's not bonging when it should be bonging for you. But really, I mean, that's just the way we're moving forward nowadays with lots of these safety features. And actually, as I'm driving past all these little cyclists, I say little cyclists, they're big cyclists. That's one of the things with the front brake assist, is that it will recognise pedestrians and it will recognise cyclists. So there, again, it's also thinking not just about the occupants of the car, but those outside it as well. And then really, I mean, I've covered the other niggles as well. I mean, yes, it can be a little bit tricky to affix the seatbelt, especially if you are a larger sized person like myself. And also, the bottom of the door sills do protrude out, and with the horrible weather conditions we've been having here lately, they get covered in mud, and it means that you do rub it against the back of your legs or back of your trousers. So again, something to be aware of there. And that's pretty much it. I mean, in terms of the little niggles and that, they are very few and far between. And on that note, I think it's time we just kind of move on to the conclusion. So what are my thoughts on the revised Hyundai i20? Well, 2023 was a big year for one massive reason for this segment of car. The Fiesta was killed off by Ford. The king is dead. So that means that this small family hatchback segment is an open battlefield, and there are a lot of very good contenders. So going up against the i20, we've got the likes of the Vauxhall Corsa, Peugeot 208 and Renault Clio, all three of which have recently had midlife revisions. And yeah, it's a very competitive segment, but the i20 does stand out. It's a great looking car. It is a brilliant all-round package. It's practical, not just in the boot, but for rear occupants. It's also jam-packed full of kit, but there are a couple of areas where it does fall a little bit behind. Interior quality is one area, and also the kind of electrification or kind of frugal engines that we're seeing now with its rivals. The fact that we don't have the mild hybrid, it might put some people off. And then when it comes to the i20's cost, well, it's kind of smack bang in the middle. It's not really the most expensive, but it's not the cheapest. But you do get, like I said, a lot of kit as standard, and you have got that decent warranty as well if you are looking at the i20 as a long-term investment or a long-term purchase. So that is one big factor to think about. But in a very competitive segment, I would look at the i20. I do really love the looks of the car. I would have it in Lucid Lime. I was gutted I couldn't get the Lucid Lime for review, but it does genuinely put a smile on your face. It is a fun little hatchback. It is well kitted out and it is keenly priced. It definitely needs to be considered if you are after a small family hatchback. So I can't say it's the best car in class because unfortunately I've not driven the other cars in this segment, but just by having it this week, I've been massively impressed. I really do like the i20. And of course there is the i20N as well. And well, that's arguably one of the best hot hatches you can buy. So the family friendly version is still incredibly good as well. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the revised Hyundai i20 hatchback, because I really have enjoyed this car. Now, as always, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Now, if you've got any questions on the i20 and my time with it, please put them down in the comment section below. Of course, I'm on social media as well. I'm on Facebook, X and Instagram, so don't forget to follow me on there for additional content. But yeah, I've been really impressed with the i20. It is a good looking, fun little family hatchback and should definitely be on your list, especially if you are looking for a new one. So yeah, everyone, I hope you all have a great day. Look after yourselves and I will see you all in the next video. So take care, everybody, and bye-bye.